blind date, one empty table, and a millionaire who thought this was just a joke. Ron Livingston wasn't looking for love. He had money, power, and a bet to win. A bet that no woman could be genuine if she didn't know who he was. So when he agreed to a blind date at a downtown diner, he expected boredom, flattery, or maybe a staged exit. Nothing more. But then she walked in with a little boy holding her hand. She didn't flirt. She didn't try to impress him. She simply asked if it was okay to order one milkshake and share it 3 ways. What happened next wasn't part of any prank. It wasn't about the date or the challenge. It was about a moment, soft, quiet, completely unexpected, that would change the way he saw everything. Because sometimes the smallest guest at the table says the words you've been waiting your whole life to hear. Before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. Ron Livingston had everything. At least that's what magazines said. He owned a string of successful restaurants. Stylish, warm, always booked out for months. He'd made his first million by 28, his second by 29, and by 35 he was exactly the man people either envied or feared. Sleek suits, cold charm, a jawline that belonged in high-end whiskey ads. But when it came to love, Ron laughed it off like a bad joke. Love is just marketing with a heartbeat, he told his best friend and business partner, Leo, over a 3rd glass of bourbon in their usual rooftop lounge. People don't fall for people. They fall for illusions. Leo leaned back. Then prove it. 7 blind dates. No names, no bios, just conversation. If even one woman shows up not knowing who you are and still cares, I win. Ron raised a brow. And if they're all like the others? Then I shut up about your tragic bachelor lifestyle for a year. A smirk, a shake of hands, a bet. 1 week later, the first 3 blind dates had gone exactly as expected. High heels, heavily filtered stories, and within 10 minutes, either a flirty, "You look just like the Ron Livingston," or worse, a fake, "What do you do for work again?" By date 4, Ron was bored. So when the app notified him of tonight's match, first name only, time and location, nothing more, he almost canceled. But Leo was watching, and Ron hated losing. So he put on a simple button-down, ditched the car service, and walked to a quiet diner on 42nd Street. A joke, he told himself. Nothing more. He was 5 minutes early. The waitress, a redhead with a name tag that read Jules, guided him to a booth by the window. "Your date should be here soon," she said with a wink. "Hope it's not a disaster." Ron half smiled. Define disaster. Before she could answer, the door jingled. He looked up and froze. A woman walked in, cheeks pink from the wind, black coat wrapped tightly around her, boots slightly damp. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy twist, and there was a smudge of something. Maybe flour, maybe crayon on her sleeve. But that wasn't what caught his attention. It was the boy beside her, maybe 8 or 9. Shy eyes, hands in the pockets of a faded hoodie. They scanned the room. Her gaze landed on him. She gave a small, awkward smile and approached the booth. "Hi, you must be Ron?" He blinked. Yeah." She gestured gently to the boy. "This is Vince. I hope it's okay. I tried to get someone to watch him, but life, you know?" Ron looked at the kid. Vince looked at the floor. A moment of silence. Then Sara, he would learn her name was Sara Clarke, slid into the booth across from him, letting Vince climb in beside her. She tucked her coat beside her, straightened her sweater, and looked him in the eye. "I get it if this is weird, We can just have dinner, say thanks, and go. Ron opened his mouth, closed it, then finally said, "You brought a chaperone." Sara blinked. "I brought my little brother." "You always take him on dates?" She shrugged. "I don't always go on dates, especially not blind ones. But I couldn't leave him home, and I didn't want to lie about it either." Ron stared at her. She wasn't apologetic. She wasn't impressed. She wasn't like the others. He leaned back in his seat, the smirk slowly returning. "Well, I guess we're all here." Vince peeked up. "Do they have hot dogs?" Ron raised an eyebrow. "I think so." Sara smiled faintly. "He'll behave. He just gets excited about ketchup." The waitress came back, clearly surprised but unfazed. "I see we're a party of 3 now." Ron said nothing. Sara smiled up at her. "2 hot dogs and 1 coffee, please." Jules turned to Ron. "And for you." He hesitated. "Same." Vince looked at him curiously. "You eat hot dogs too?" Ron leaned in slightly. "Only when it's a very serious occasion." The boy grinned. Something in Ron's chest shifted almost imperceptibly. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like pretending. Vince was quiet at first. Not withdrawn, just observant. The way some kids are when they've seen too much too early and learned that listening is safer than speaking. He clutched the laminated menu like a mission briefing and didn't say a word while Sara gently guided him to sit upright and not swing his legs. Ron watched it all unfold from across the booth. Not the chaos he expected. No sticky fingers grabbing salt shakers. No whining or spills. Just a boy who studied everything, including him. Jules brought water and crayons. Vince ignored the water, took the crayons, and without asking, flipped the kids' menu and began to draw. Sara sipped her coffee and exhaled. "Thanks for not walking out." Ron lifted an eyebrow. "You expected me to?" She smiled wryly. "You looked like you were calculating the exact second to bolt." "Was I that obvious?" "A little." He paused. "Why bring him?" Sara stirred her cup slowly. "Because I had no choice. Because babysitters cost more than my hourly wage. Because his after-school program got cut. Take your pick." Ron didn't answer right away. She looked up at him, not defensive, just honest. "I'm not here to impress you, Ron. I didn't come for your money. I didn't even know your last name until the hostess mumbled it." That surprised him. Most people knew. Even when he used an alias, the stories traveled. But she just took another sip and said, "I came because I wanted to remember what adult conversation felt like." The boy interrupted. "I drew you." Ron blinked. "Me?" Vince turned the paper around. A superhero figure drawn in crayon, tall, with a cape made of a napkin and a mug of coffee instead of a weapon. Ron stared. Sara chuckled. "I guess you're Captain Caffeine now." He laughed despite himself. "That's new." "Vince loves heroes," Sara said. "He doesn't have many real ones." Ron looked at the boy again. The quiet, sharp eyes. The way his fingers held the red crayon too tightly, as if afraid it would vanish. He wanted to ask what happened, but didn't. Not yet. Instead, he said, "Well, Captain Caffeine always arrives on time and never leaves a hot dog unfinished." "Is that your motto?" Sara asked, amused. "It's a work in progress." Their food arrived. 2 hot dogs, 1 grilled cheese, 1 more cup of coffee. No wine, no candles, no violinist. Just the clink of silverware and the low hum of the diner's playlist. Something jazzy and low stakes. Vince munched with gusto. Ron surprised himself by doing the same. Sara ate slowly, watchful, tired. "What do you do?" he asked between bites. "I'm studying to be a nurse. I work nights at a 24-hour cafe, and mornings I help out at a kids' reading center, which I guess makes me both underpaid and exhausted." Ron tilted his head. "Why nursing?" "Because I like fixing things," she said simply. "And because my mom got sick when I was 16. No one explained anything. I don't want other people to feel that." He nodded slowly. "And him?" he asked, glancing at Vince. Sara softened. "He's my little brother. Our mom passed 2 years ago. Dad bailed before that. So it's just us." Ron's throat tightened, unexpectedly. The boy wiped ketchup from his chin with a napkin folded perfectly in half. "Sara says I'm not baggage. I'm bonus luggage." Ron laughed. Sara turned pink. "He hears everything." "I like that one," Ron said. "Bonus luggage." The conversation drifted. They talked about school lunches, burnt coffee, favorite cartoons. Vince asked if Ron had a dog. He didn't. Vince said he wanted a turtle. Sara promised he couldn't even keep a cactus alive. It was easy. Too easy. And that's what made Ron nervous. He wasn't supposed to enjoy this. This was supposed to be a bet. A social experiment. Proof that he was right. That no one came without expecting something in return. But then Vince yawned and leaned against Sara's shoulder, and she gently adjusted his hoodie and said, "You can close your eyes, Bug, just for a minute." Ron watched her fingers. Steady, warm, practiced. "You're good with him," he murmured. Sara looked up, a little startled. "I have to be." "No, you choose to be." A pause. Then she said, "You're not what I expected either." He smirked. "Was it the haircut?" She smiled. "It was the part where you stayed." Another pause. Vince had dozed off, curled into the corner of the booth. Sara looked at her watch. "We should probably go." Ron hesitated. "Can I walk you out?" She looked at him, considering, then nodded. They slid from the booth. Ron reached for the check. Sara didn't fight him on it, but she did mutter, "We only ordered hot dogs." He grinned. "Best ones I've had in years." As they stepped into the cold night, Sara wrapped her coat tighter. Vince stirred in her arms but didn't wake. Ron opened his mouth to say something, anything, but she beat him to it. "Thanks for not laughing at him." He blinked. "Why would I? Most people do." Not to his face. "But you can feel it." She looked at him, eyes steady. "You didn't look at him like that." Ron didn't know what to say, so he didn't say anything. Just watched as she crossed the street and disappeared into the night. One arm around her brother, the other holding the drawing Vince left behind. Captain Caffeine, drawn in crayon with a crooked smile. And for the first time in years, Ron wanted to be someone worth drawing again. The next morning, Ron stood in the kitchen of his penthouse, staring blankly at a plate of untouched toast. The city stretched beneath his windows, all steel and glass and morning noise, but none of it got through. The drawing sat on the marble countertop. Captain Caffeine, a superhero with coffee for power and ketchup on his cape. Ron wasn't sure why he'd taken it, or why he hadn't thrown it away the second he got home. But now it was there. A page of child's art among polished countertops and imported tiles. It didn't belong, and somehow that made it fit even more. He picked it up, holding it between his fingers. The edges were bent. Crayons smudged at the corners. The handwriting was lopsided but clear. To Ron. From Vince. You seem nice for a grown-up. Ron let out a breath that almost felt like a laugh. Then he folded the paper, tucked it in the drawer next to his keys, and left. Across the city, in a much smaller apartment, Sara was making scrambled eggs with exactly one egg and a lot of toast crumbs. Vince sat at the table in his pajamas, drawing again, this time a turtle with glasses. Do turtles go to school? He asked. Only the cool ones, she replied, sliding the plate in front of him. Eat. He did, quietly, but after a few bites he said, Is that man coming back? Sara didn't look up. What man? The one from the diner. The one who didn't laugh at my hot dog. She hesitated. I don't think so, bud. Oh, he didn't pout, didn't whine, just kept coloring. She sipped her coffee and stared out the window, the city already groaning awake outside. She didn't expect anything to come of that date, blind or not. It had been one night, a nice dinner, a strange spark, but nothing real. That's what she told herself. That's what she needed to believe. Meanwhile, in his downtown office, Ron couldn't focus. His assistant knocked 3 times before he looked up. You've got the investors from Singapore in 20. He nodded, adjusted his collar. Right? And there's a gift bag on your desk. From Leo. With a note. She left. Ron pulled out the card. For dates down. 3 to go. Let me know when you're ready to admit I'm right. L. He dropped it in the trash. That evening, he ignored 5 new matches from the dating app and instead searched his contacts for the hostess from the diner. He never saved her name, just the restaurant number. He hesitated, then dialed. Hi, this is Ron. I was in last night. Booth by the window. The hostess sounded tired. Right? You're the guy who stayed longer than usual. We actually made bets. He ignored that. I was wondering. The girl who came in, dark hair, little brother named Vince. Did she leave any contact info? Or reservation history? There was a pause. I'm sorry, sir. Blind dates are anonymous. Privacy policy. He hung up. The next day, he called the app's concierge feature. They wouldn't give out details. Even to Ron Livingston. Even with money on the table. He spent 20 minutes considering whether to run a background check. Then stopped. That wasn't who he wanted to be. That wasn't who Vince would draw. 3 days later, it happened by accident. He was walking through Midtown, headed to a tasting event for a potential new wine supplier, when a voice caught his attention. Hey, we've got free bookmarks and story time inside. Bring the little ones. He turned. A folding sign read, Maple Lane Reading Center, Community Day. And through the open doors, he saw her. Sara. Hair tied back. No makeup. Wearing a name tag and helping a toddler find the right book. Vince sat cross-legged on a beanbag beside her, flipping pages like it was serious work. Ron stepped back instinctively, but then Vince looked up. Their eyes met. The boy's face lit up. Captain Caffeine, he blurted, standing up. Sara turned. Froze. Ron raised a hand in a wave, sheepish. She looked stunned. What are you? Walking, he said. Apparently in the right direction. She smiled just a little. Do you want to come in? She asked. There's no coffee, but we've got dinosaurs. He nodded. Dinosaurs are acceptable. Inside it felt different. Children's voices, worn rugs, the smell of crayons and juice. Ron sat awkwardly on a tiny chair while Vince showed him a book about sea turtles and informed him that turtles do go to school, but only on Wednesdays. Sara watched them from behind a bookshelf. Later, She approached, holding 2 paper cups of lemonade. "I didn't expect to see you again," she said softly. "I didn't plan it." "Is that how you normally meet women?" He chuckled. "Only the impressive ones." She looked down. "This isn't a date." "I know, but you still came." "I did." Vince ran up and tugged Sarah's sleeve. "Can he come over sometime?" Sara looked at Ron. "Can you cook?" He smiled. "I own a dozen restaurants." She tilted her head. "So that's a yes." When Ron left that afternoon, he didn't take her number. He didn't ask for more. But he looked back as he reached the sidewalk, just once. She was watching him. And when she smiled, it felt like something had started, something that might just matter. The next time Ron saw them, it wasn't by accident. It was raining. Not the dramatic, cinematic kind, but that steady gray drizzle that soaked collars and blurred city lights. The kind of weather that usually sent him home early or kept him inside his office. But today, he was parked outside the Maple Lane Reading Center, waiting for the woman with eyes that didn't try to seduce, but saw straight through him. Waiting for the boy who drew superheroes with coffee mugs and asked questions grown men were too scared to answer. And then there they were, Sara in her oversized hoodie, the one with paint specks on the sleeve. Vince under a child-sized umbrella covered in dinosaurs. She held his hand and walked slowly, balancing 2 paper bags and a worn canvas tote across her shoulder. Ron stepped out of the car. Sarah's eyes widened when she saw him. Not scared, just surprised. Vince beamed. "You again," he grinned. Sara raised an eyebrow. "Are you following us now?" Ron smiled, only slightly damp from the rain. "No." "Yes, a little." "You okay?" He hesitated, then glanced at Vince. "Yeah, just wanted to see you." Sara shifted the tote. "I'm guessing you don't have much experience with umbrellas." He looked down at his completely soaked blazer. "Guilty," she sighed, handed Vince one of the bags, and moved to stand beside Ron under the child's umbrella. It barely covered them both. "Well, you're in luck. Our apartment's 2 blocks that way." Vince looked up. "Are you coming over?" Ron met Sarah's eyes. She didn't answer, but she didn't say no. The apartment was small. Not in the cute Instagram way, but in the make every inch count way. Shoes by the door. Dishes drying on a folded towel. One bookshelf that held everything from Dr. Seuss to nursing textbooks. A couch that doubled as a bed for guests or maybe Sara. Vince dumped the groceries on the table and kicked off his sneakers. "I'll set the plates." Sara gave Ron a look that said don't be weird about the mess, and hung up his damp coat. "You didn't have to come," she said, wiping off a chair for him. "I know, but you did." "I wanted to." She studied him. "Why?" He hesitated. "Because I felt like I could breathe around you." Her eyebrows lifted. "You don't usually?" "Not for years." Before she could answer, Vince called out, "Can we have noodles and ketchup?" Sara groaned. "You're corrupting him." Ron laughed. "Guilty again." Dinner was simple. Elbow pasta, store-brand juice, and dry jokes. Vince declared Ron's superhero name should be the ketchuper and made him sign the back of his drawing. Sara watched them, her brother smiling freely, Ron listening like every word mattered. She couldn't remember the last time the apartment felt this light. After dishes were washed and Vince was tucked into bed, Sara poured 2 mugs of tea and sat across from Ron at the small kitchen table. "You know," she said slowly, "this was supposed to be one date, one free dinner. I didn't even think you'd stay." Ron looked at her over the rim of his mug. You brought a kid. I stayed. That usually scares people off. Maybe I'm not people. That made her laugh soft, tired. No, you're definitely something else. They were quiet a while. Then Sara asked the question that had been forming in the silence. What about you? What's your story? He looked down, took a breath. I had a sister, younger, reckless, beautiful, brilliant. She died in a car crash 6 years ago. Her daughter survived. I took her in. Sara's face shifted, from surprise to something gentler. She lives with you? She used to, but she has her own school now. Boarding. She needed help I couldn't give alone. She's on the spectrum, brilliant too, but different. I see her every weekend. Sara reached out without thinking and touched his hand. That must have been hard. He didn't pull away. It still is. She looked at him, really looked. So why the dating app? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. A bet. A joke. I told my friend no one's real anymore. That love doesn't come without a price tag. He dared me to go on 7 blind dates. I said sure, easy win. And Ron met her gaze. Then you walked in. He left an hour later, after Vince had called him back for just one more story. Ron read it with voices, even did the turtle impression. Sara stood in the doorway when he left, one arm hugging herself. I'm not like the people in your world, she said. He turned, hands in pockets. Maybe that's why I like being in yours. Her expression softened. You don't know me yet. I'd like to. Another pause. Then, quietly, she said, I'd like that too. He walked into the rain without an umbrella. Didn't notice the wet. Only noticed that something inside him, something sealed off for years, had cracked open. And for once, he wasn't scared of what might come through. Ron didn't expect silence. Not after that night. Not after the way Vince had curled against him on the couch with wide eyes and whispered, You're really good at turtle voices. Not after Sara had stood barefoot in the doorway, looking at him like maybe, just maybe, she believed he was real. But 3 days passed. Then 5. No texts. No calls. Not even a drawing from Vince. He waited. Checked his phone more often than he wanted to admit. He even typed a message once. Do you want to get noodles again? But deleted it before he hit send. He told himself he was being dramatic. Then he told himself he was being rational. Then he stopped telling himself anything and walked into his own office late on a Friday night, only to find Leo lounging in his chair, spinning a pen between his fingers. Well? Leo asked. Date 6. Ron blinked. What? The bet. The girl. The one with the kid. Or were you too busy reading bedtime stories to remember we had a scoreboard? Ron tossed his keys on the desk. We're done with the bet. Leo raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? I'm not doing the rest. You've got one more date. Ron looked at him. Tired, dry, flat. She wasn't part of the game, Leo. Okay, Leo said carefully. But do you even know her last name? That landed like a slap. Ron realized he didn't. Meanwhile, across the city, Sara sat on the steps outside the reading center, watching clouds roll over the skyline. Vince was inside, helping tape posters to the wall for the weekend's Books and Biscuits fundraiser. He took the job very seriously. She sipped coffee from a chipped mug and tried to focus on anything other than the growing, gnawing awareness that she missed a man she had no right to miss. She didn't know his favorite color, didn't know if he liked cats, didn't know why he felt more honest in 2 evenings than anyone had in years. But what she did know, that the silence made her nervous. Had she imagined it all? Had she let herself believe the richest man she'd ever met might care? Maybe he'd gone back to his real world, the world of chefs and investors and penthouses without chipped mugs. She scolded herself for hoping. But when Vince came out holding a bookmark that said, "Never stop turning pages," she smiled. Weakly, but enough. He looked at her. "He's coming back, right?" She didn't lie. But she didn't answer either. Ron tried. He walked past the reading center twice. Didn't see her. Didn't go in. He messaged the app support again. Still no answer. He thought about sending Vince a book with a drawing inside. But that felt like a cop-out. Then, on a Wednesday evening just before sunset, he took a risk. He walked into the reading center. Inside, a group of children sat on the carpet listening to a volunteer read about pirates. Vince wasn't among them. Sara wasn't either. Ron turned to the woman at the front desk. "Hi, I'm looking for Sara Clarke. She works here sometimes." The woman hesitated. "Sorry, she's not on today. Everything okay?" Ron paused. "I wanted to return something. For her brother." A beat. Then, "Try the cafe on 9th and Garver. She's got the night shift." The cafe was small, the kind of place where everything was warm, the air, the light, the smell of old espresso. Sara was behind the counter in a black apron, hair tied in a knot, wiping down trays with half her energy. She didn't see him at first, but when he approached the counter, she looked up and froze. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then she said, "Didn't expect to see you in a place like this. I wasn't sure you wanted to see me at all." Sara leaned on the counter, tired but calm. "I thought maybe you got what you needed." He blinked. "What does that mean?" "You showed up. You were kind. You made my brother smile. And then you vanished." Ron shook his head. "I didn't vanish. You didn't stay either." He looked at her, helpless. "I didn't know if I was allowed to." That surprised her. She folded her arms. "You don't seem like the type to ask permission." "I'm not. But with you, I didn't want to push or ruin something by naming it too soon." Sara blinked. Her throat tightened. "Vince kept asking when you'd come back. I kept asking myself the same thing." Silence. "Then why now?" "Because I didn't like how it felt to not be around you." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper, the superhero drawing. A little wrinkled, carefully kept. "I think I kept this so I'd remember what it felt like to be seen." Sara stared at it, then looked at him. Then quietly said, "My shift ends in 10. They walked in silence. Vince wasn't with her tonight. He had a neighbor watching cartoons with him 2 floors up. The streets were wet, reflecting light like glass. When they reached her apartment building, she stopped him outside. "You're a complicated man, Ron Livingston." He smiled. "So I've been told. And you're here now because of a bet?" He shook his head. "The bet ended the moment I saw you. Everything after that was me trying to be the kind of man you wouldn't walk away from." Sara looked down, then reached out and gently took his hand. "I don't know what this is yet," she whispered. "Neither do I," he admitted. "But I know I don't want to guess alone." She didn't kiss him. She didn't invite him in. But her hand stayed in his until the doorman unlocked the door. And in that moment, it was enough. Saturday came with blue skies and the kind of sun that made the city feel like it was offering second chances. Sara stood in front of the mirror in the hallway, brushing Vince's hair with one hand and adjusting the collar of his shirt with the other. He was dressed in his best, which still meant slightly scuffed sneakers, but his hair was neat, his face clean, and there was a folded piece of paper peeking out from his jacket pocket. "What's that?" she asked. He grinned. "Secret." She raised an eyebrow. "It's not a drawing of a hot dog again, is it?" "Not this time." She gave him a final once-over and picked up her bag. "Ready. Ready." They arrived at the restaurant just past noon. Not one of Ron's flagship locations. No velvet menus or $28 salads. This one was tucked in the corner of a leafy street, with flower pots near the door and soft jazz playing inside. Family day. Ron had invited them through a quiet text earlier in the week. Vince asked if I knew any places with pancakes and crayons. Turns out I do. No pressure. No hidden meaning. Just brunch. Sara had hesitated. But when Vince read the message over her shoulder and softly said, "Maybe we can just go to say thank you," she'd said yes. Inside, the host smiled warmly. "Welcome, Ms. Clarke. Mr. Livingston is already seated." Sara blinked. "You know my name?" He nodded. "He asked us to treat you like family." She looked at Vince. "Well then." They walked to a sunlit booth by the window. Ron stood when he saw them. He wore a soft gray sweater, sleeves pushed to his elbows, and that same uncertain smile he'd had at her apartment. "Hey," he said. "Hey," Sara replied. Vince slid into the booth immediately and began unfolding his secret paper. Ron glanced at him. "I've got orange juice and drawing paper ready. You good?" The boy nodded and held up the paper. "This is for you." Ron unfolded it carefully. Inside was a drawing 3 stick figures sitting at a table. One had dark hair. One wore glasses. The third held a coffee cup and had a small heart over his head. Vince had written, "You can sit with us again." Ron's throat closed. "Thanks, buddy." Sara looked at them both, and for the first time in weeks, let herself breathe. Brunch was full of syrup and spilled sugar packets, and a single moment when Vince asked loudly if Captain Caffeine ever had a girlfriend. Sara nearly choked. Ron just smiled and said, "He's figuring that out." After the meal, Vince ran to the corner to watch the chefs through the open kitchen window. Sara turned to Ron. "So, you own this place too?" "I do." "You ever just eat like a normal person?" "This is me trying to be normal." She smiled. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. "I have something for Vince. Not a gift. Just something I thought he might like." She opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten voucher. 1 free trip to any bookstore, plus snacks and 1 superhero movie of his choice. Redeemable anytime. She stared at it. "Ron, I know, it's probably cheesy, but I wanted him to have something that was just fun." Sara looked at him. "You don't have to keep doing things. I'm not doing them to impress you. I'm doing them because I like seeing him smile, and because I like being around you." She paused. "You say things like that very easily." He met her eyes. "Only when I mean them." Later, they walked through a small park nearby. Vince climbed on a low wall and pretended to be a ninja turtle. Ron offered to catch him if he fell. Sara and Ron walked a few steps behind. "He really likes you," she said quietly. "I really like him." They walked a few moments in silence. Then she asked, "Do you always hide who you are on dates?" He stopped. "Not always. But with you, I didn't want the noise." "What noise?" "The assumptions, the questions, the expectations." He turned to her. "I've had women pretend not to know me. I've had articles written about my shoes. But you sat down with your brother, ordered a hot dog, and didn't flinch. Sara looked away. I don't know how to be anyone but me. Good. I don't want anyone else. Her breath caught. I'm still figuring this out, Ron, she said softly. So am I. Vince called from the bench ahead, holding a stick like a sword. Let's play heroes. Ron looked at Sara. Permission to join? She smiled. Granted. That night, back at the apartment, Sara tucked Vince in while he asked if Ron was officially a sidekick now. She said no. Ron was probably more like the grumpy mentor who secretly cared. Vince grinned and fell asleep hugging the bookstore voucher. Sara walked into the kitchen and poured herself tea. Her phone buzzed. Ron, I had a good time today. You make the world feel less sharp. She stared at the screen, then typed, You make it feel like it's okay to have soft spots. She hit send, then stared out the window, the city alive beneath her, and wondered how long it would be before she stopped bracing for the end of things. Because somehow, this felt like it could last. It happened the way most things do when you're not looking for them. Sara wasn't trying to learn anything that day. She wasn't investigating, wasn't suspicious. She was just trying to make it to her second shift on time, crossing a street corner near the financial district with a paper bag of bakery donations meant for the reading center. That's when she saw it. A digital billboard. Hi. Bright, effortlessly polished. The ad was sleek. A slow pan over families enjoying brunch, a brief flash of a chef plating food, and then him, Ron, in a crisp navy suit, smiling that exact half-smile she thought only appeared when he looked at her. The text faded in behind him. Carter and Livingston Hospitality. Feeding the future. Her feet stopped moving. The bag of bread slipped slightly in her hands. Livingston. She had never asked his last name. Never thought to. And now it screamed down at her from 30 feet above traffic. People passed her on both sides. Horns blared. A child tugged at his mother's coat. The light changed, and all Sara could do was stare up, the truth growing larger than the billboard itself. Ron wasn't just the owner of one nice place. He was that Livingston, the silent partner behind a dozen of the city's most exclusive restaurants. The one in articles she skipped, the name printed in glossy magazines next to phrases like billionaire genius and hospitality mogul. He wasn't just a guy who could cook. He was the whole kitchen. She didn't cry. She walked the next 10 blocks in silence, dropped off the donations, smiled like she meant it, got to the cafe early, brewed coffee with trembling fingers. When her shift ended, she went home, turned off her phone, and sat on the floor of the living room while Vince did math homework beside her. She stared at the wall, and for the first time in weeks she felt stupid. How could she have missed it? How could she have believed it? The next morning, Ron texted, Got tickets for the aquarium this weekend. Vince mentioned turtles again. Interested. No reply. That afternoon he called. Rang once. Then silence. On the third day he showed up. The reading center was closed for a staff meeting. The cafe was shut down for repairs. So he knocked on her door. Vince answered. His eyes lit up, but dimmed a second later. Sara's not feeling good. Ron crouched. Can I say hi? The boy looked back at the hallway. She said not to open the door if you came. Ron froze. Vince looked guilty. But I already did. From inside, her voice, It's fine, Vince. I'll talk to him. Sara stepped into the light, arms crossed. No smile. No softness. Ron straightened. I'm guessing you saw the billboard. She nodded once. I didn't lie. he said quietly. No, she replied. You just didn't tell me. I didn't want it to matter. But it does. The hallway buzzed with silence. I let myself believe we were in the same story, she whispered. But you're not the guy who walks a kid home with ketchup on his shoes. You're the one who owns the city block. I'm both, he said. I swear to you, I'm both. She shook her head. You made me feel safe, like I could trust you, like we were building something. We were. No, she said softly. You were building a version of yourself I'd accept. But you never gave me the choice. That one hurt. He stepped back. I never meant to hurt you. She didn't cry, but her voice wavered. You have no idea how rare it is for someone like me to feel seen, heard, equal. I thought maybe, for once. He waited. She didn't finish. And when she closed the door, quietly, not with anger, but something far worse, he didn't knock again. Ron didn't sleep that night. He sat in his office with the lights off, the city stretching beneath the glass like 1,000 chances he never took. On his desk, beside the now faded Captain Caffeine drawing, was a blank piece of stationery and a pen that had written 100 contracts, but never anything honest. He stared at the page, then began. Dear Sara, I could tell you I kept my last name quiet because I wanted to be normal. I could say I didn't think it mattered, that what we had didn't depend on job titles or bank accounts. But the truth is, I was scared. Scared you'd leave the moment you knew. Scared I'd lose the one thing in my life that didn't treat me like a headline. I never lied. But I didn't tell you the truth either. And I know that silence was its own kind of betrayal. You made me feel real, Sara. You and Vince, you didn't just see me. You reminded me of the version of myself I liked best. The one who reads turtle books. The one who eats hot dogs. The one who waits outside a reading center in the rain, just for the chance to see you smile again. I don't want to win anymore. I just want you. But I'll wait. As long as it takes. Ron. He never sent it. Folded it. Slipped it into his coat pocket. And carried it around like a weight. Meanwhile, in Sara's apartment, the quiet was different now. Vince didn't ask where Ron went. He just got quieter too. He still drew, but the superheroes were darker, smaller, farther from each other on the page. Sara watched it happen, heart heavy, unsure how to explain what almost happened. She never told Vince about the billboard. Didn't say the word billionaire. Didn't mention the company or the fear in her throat when she realized just how big Ron's world really was. But kids don't need explanations. They feel what's missing. On Thursday, she dropped Vince off at school and walked the long way home. Her route passed the back of one of Ron's restaurants. She told herself it was a coincidence. But she still stopped for a second. And still walked faster when someone came out the door. That night, a soft knock came at the apartment. Sara opened it expecting a neighbor. Instead, it was Jules, the red-haired waitress from the first night. From the diner. She held a small envelope in one hand, a confused expression on her face. Sorry to bother you. I probably shouldn't be here. But I work for Ron, well, for the company. And he left this for you with no instructions. Just said if I ever saw you again to give it to you. Sara took it silently. Inside was a copy of the letter. The original. Folded carefully. Creased at the corners. And with it, Vince's first drawing. Captain Caffeine. Sara didn't cry. But she didn't sleep either. She reread the letter 3 times. Then tucked it back into the envelope and walked to Vince's room. He was awake, curled on his side. Hey, she whispered. Remember that day we had pancakes and crayons with someone? He turned slowly. I remember. He made a mistake, she said gently. But I think he's sorry. Vince blinked. Does he still want to come back? Sara nodded. I think so. Then maybe we should help him. She smiled. You think so? Yeah. He's not finished being a superhero yet. The next afternoon, it was Vince who knocked on Ron's door. Not alone. Sara stood behind him, her hand on his shoulder, heart racing. Ron answered, his face stunned, hopeful, scared. Vince held out a folded piece of paper. I drew a new one, he said. It's us. Together. You're not holding coffee anymore. You're holding my hand. Ron knelt, took the paper, blinked hard, then looked at Sara. She spoke first. I still don't know how to fit into your world. He shook his head. Then let's build one that fits us both. She exhaled, and for the first time since the door closed, she stepped forward. They didn't talk about the letter that night. They didn't need to. Sara brought soup in a thermos. Vince insisted on setting the table with mismatched napkins, and Ron, for once, didn't try to impress anyone. He just showed up, present, real. The man who read bedtime stories, not the one in the suit under a spotlight. His penthouse had never felt so warm. Vince perched in one of the tall chairs, swinging his legs and explaining how soup always tastes better if it comes from a borrowed thermos. Ron agreed without question. Sara sat across the table, quieter than usual, but her eyes softer now, less guarded. She wore a faded blue sweater, sleeves pushed to her elbows, the same way she always did when she let herself be comfortable. Dinner was simple. Soup, bread, a small plate of Ron's chef-made brownies that Vince rated 8 out of 10. Could be warmer. They laughed. They talked about nothing important, and yet it felt like everything. After dinner, Vince wandered into the living room, found the stack of superhero figurines Ron had once hidden in a drawer, and arranged them into a parade across the coffee table. Sara leaned against the kitchen island, watching him. Ron handed her a cup of tea. He doesn't see any of this as strange, she said. Ron smiled. Kids are better at recognizing safe places than we are. She looked at him. That's what you've been trying to give us, isn't it? A safe place. A place that feels like ours. He didn't answer right away. Then quietly, I've built restaurants for years, but I've never built a home. Not really. Not one that mattered. Sara's eyes didn't leave his. And now, he shrugged slightly. Now I want to make space. For you. For Vince. For something that doesn't need reservations. Later, Vince curled up on the couch with a blanket and a worn stuffed turtle. Ron watched him for a long moment before whispering, I've been trying to find a way to say thank you. Sara glanced over. For what? For the hot dog. She laughed softly. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped. That night, I thought I was running a test. I thought I was proving the world didn't have space for sincerity anymore. And then you walked in, and you didn't even flinch. Sara sipped her tea. I was hungry. You were brave. She looked at him. I was desperate. He met her gaze. You were exactly what I didn't know I needed. Silence, but not an empty one. Then she said, I'm still scared. I know, but I don't want to walk away. His voice dropped. Then stay. Vince stirred, sat up, yawned. Can I ask something? He mumbled. Ron smiled. Always. Can we do this again tomorrow? Sara raised an eyebrow. Dinner or superhero reenactments? Both. Ron looked at her. Waited. She nodded slowly. Yeah, we can. Vince smiled and laid back down. Sara took a deep breath and leaned her head against Ron's shoulder. No declarations. No promises. Just presence. And for once, that was more than enough. Spring arrived quietly. Not with fanfare or fireworks. Just longer afternoons, softer air, and the sound of birds returning to the rooftops like they remembered something worth coming back for. Sara stood on the porch of a small house just outside the city. Not quite countryside, not quite suburb. The sky above was watercolor blue. Wind tugged gently at her hair. Vince was somewhere inside, drawing, narrating out loud to no one in particular. Ron was at the edge of the lawn, kneeling beside a small garden bed he'd just planted. Tomatoes, he said, though neither of them knew if they'd survive. He looked up. She smiled. I still feel like I broke into someone else's life, she admitted. You didn't, he said. You rebuilt mine. It had taken time. After that night in the penthouse, there were weeks of figuring it out, what it meant to blend two worlds that didn't naturally fit. Sara still worked shifts at the cafe, but fewer now. Ron still ran meetings, but always home by dinner. They took turns picking Vince up from school. They learned awkwardly how to share space. One evening, Vince had pointed at Ron's phone during dinner and said, "No business at the table. This is family time." Ron had never turned his phone off faster. Inside the house, Vince sat at the kitchen table, coloring something carefully. The fridge had become a gallery, drawings of stick figures, turtles, a superhero with a chef's hat. But this one was different. It was a home. 3 figures on a porch, a swing, a cat, which they did not yet own. Sara walked in, glanced at the paper and ruffled his hair. "What's this one?" "Our team," he said simply. She kissed the top of his head, then walked outside and sat beside Ron on the steps. "I don't want to be rescued," she said. "I don't want to rescue you." "Then what is this?" He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a key. Not fancy, not dramatic, just silver and warm from his hands. "I bought this place a month ago. Not for you. For us. For space. For soup on rainy nights and drawing contests and turtles with glasses." She looked down at the key. "Ron, I'm not asking for forever. Just for the chance to keep choosing this. One day at a time." She took the key, held it, not as a promise, but as a choice. Vince called from inside, "I made hot chocolate." They stood. Ron hesitated, then took her hand, gently. No pressure, just warmth. And she didn't let go. That night, the 3 of them curled on the couch beneath a patchwork blanket. An old movie flickered on the TV. Vince leaned against Sara, half asleep. Ron sat beside them, his pinky brushing hers. Still hesitant, still asking, "Is this okay?" Sara turned to him and whispered, "I never thought I'd feel rich." He looked at her, eyes soft, voice low. "Me neither." And this time, neither of them meant money. They meant laughter, and drawings, and soup, and a little boy who believed in second chances. Because this wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real, messy, honest, earned, and exactly where they were supposed to be, together.